Okay, we're recording, and Andy, I'll be here in the background. If you have any technical difficulties, just give a shout.
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Let's see. So thank you all very much for joining us. It is Tuesday, September 29th at 6:06 p.m. And I'm calling this Town of Silverton Master Plan Committee meeting to order. In the video setting, I'm not sure the necessity for a roll call, but I will note that the entire committee is here minus Sue Morris, who will hopefully be joining us shortly. And I'll reflect that in the minutes. I'll also note that I was not able to get the September 22 meeting minutes to each of you sufficiently prior to this meeting. I just sent them about 2 or 3 minutes ago. So I will postpone requesting your review and approval of those minutes until the next meeting that we have, if that's all right with everyone, which would have been the first item on tonight's agenda. The second item is a presentation that I'm excited about. It's the Comprehensive Plan 101 training. Patrick Rondinelli, who's on the call right now, suggested that we start the process with the state demography presentation we had last week, and then this Comp Plan 101 training we're having tonight. And Andy Hill, also from DOLA, was nice enough to spend a good chunk of time preparing this presentation for us and thinking about Silverton specifically and where we are in this process. And I'm excited for her to be here tonight and to do this presentation. So I will pass the mic over to Andy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, well, I am Andy Hill. I've worked for the Department of Local Affairs for, I'm coming up on 25 years. And I love giving these presentations because I get to hear what issues you guys are all dealing with, what problems come up, solutions come up. I think that's always really fun. And then I like to share with other communities what I learned. So that's helpful for me and helpful for other communities. While I'm pulling this up, Lisa, does that look right?
That looks great.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, and thank you to Patrick for joining. Your regional manager, Patrick Rondinelli, is on as well, which I find always really helpful because he has a lot of experience and insights. And so Patrick, just a reminder to you to chime in anytime. What I'd love to do, just to take a minute, if you don't mind, I know you all know each other, but I'd love to hear who's on the webinar. And so if you can, I don't know how to do this because we probably all have different ranking order of who's in the windows, but what I'd love to hear is your name and what your role is and the length of time that you've been involved in that role. And maybe we can start with elected officials first and then go to Planning Commission and working group folks. I know there's a lot of overlap, lots of multiple hat wearing, but maybe that'll help to give kind of an order.
Would it be helpful to jump back out of screen share so we can see each other as we're getting started with that intro?
Yep, there
Awesome.
you go.
Great. Well, I'll kick it off. I think since I've already spoken with everybody. I'm Mayor of Silverton on a number of committees. This committee was created to support Lisa Adair's process in looking at revisions to the master plan. And Lisa was previously working with the Planning Commission in that process. And that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Mayor.
Looking at my screen, Elizabeth is next to me if you'd like to go next.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Bars, and right now I'm the principal at our K through 12 school. I've been working there for about 18 years, the middle school teacher for many years, and then principal for 4 years.
Wonderful. Thank you. And you're on the working group, or are you also an elected or appointed?
Nope, I am on the working group.
Thanks. All right, let's see. Okay.
Okay.
Sue, do you want to go next?
Yes. Sure. Hello there. I'm Sue Morris, retired community development planner. With Jefferson County for a number of years and then moved to the Western Slope. And I've been doing resort development, ski area planning, and then traditional neighborhood design development community outside of Durango. But I'll emphasize retired right now. And I'm on the working group.
Wonderful, thank you. All right. Lisa, do you want to?
So I'm Lisa Adair. We have two Lisas that work at Town Hall. Lisa Branner's also on tonight's call. And I'm Lisa A, and I'm the Town and County Planner for a little over 1 year.
Great, thank you. All right, how about Lisa B?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Branner. I'm the Community Relations Manager for the town, and I'm here in a couple of capacities tonight. Number one is that I'm running the tech side of the meeting, but I also work on a number of planning initiatives for the town focused on outdoor rec, the Silverton Area Trails Plan and the Kendall Mountain Master Plan are the two big projects in that realm. And so I'm interested to just hear about how to develop a comprehensive plan for those projects as well. So thank you guys for being here.
Good, thank you. Okay, how about Melissa?
Hi, I'm Melissa Childs, and I am the representative from the Town and County Planning Commission for the Master Plan Committee here, and I'm excited to learn lots tonight.
Thanks. All right, and Jess?
Hi, Andy. Hi, Patrick. Good to see you again. My name is Jess Wiegert. I'm a town trustee. I've been in the position for going on 5 years now. I've also been on the Planning Commission, San Juan County Planning Commission, Town and County, for that 5 years as well.
Thank you. And Patrick, I think this group knows you, but maybe not everyone. I don't know. You want to introduce yourself again?
Sure. Patrick Rondinelli, Southwest Regional Manager for DOLA. And yeah, I do know almost everybody on here or been around or associated or at least on meetings with everybody in one format or another. Live in Ouray, was a former city administrator for Ouray for 13 years prior to being here. So have very close connections to Silverton, one of my favorite spots.
All right, did I miss anybody? Okay, I'm gonna try to share again and see if I pick the right one. Give this a shot. All right, Lisa B, did I make it work again?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. That's helpful for me. This sounds like a pretty good, focused working group. And it sounds like you've been making some good progress. And so I'm happy to come and come virtually over to see you guys to talk a little bit about master planning or comprehensive planning. I'll just start right away since I used both terms. The statutes refer to it as a master plan, but since those statutes were written, and you may already know this, the discipline of planning has just decided, let's just call it a comp plan or comprehensive plan, because to be an effective plan, it needs to recognize the relationships between land use and everything else. It needs to be comprehensive in nature. Otherwise, you can kind of plan in a vacuum. So this is what we're going to cover tonight. I'm gonna give kind of a high-level overview, give you a sampling of some trends and best practices that I've been seeing. I'll even throw out a few examples. I've copied and pasted some graphics in, some excerpts in from plans. You won't be able to read them all, they're pretty small, but it'll give you an idea of what's out there, give you an idea of look and feel, And you can always take some notes and go and find those plans or email me and I'll send out links. I have a few links I'll share throughout the evening too in the chat. And then I'll cover some steps and mechanics and just a few quick notes on public engagement. Especially, it's always an important and maybe the most challenging part of any comprehensive plan process, but especially now with the pandemic, it's much more difficult. And so we have to be really thoughtful and really know our communities and their preferences and how they want to be involved. So before we get too deep into the weeds, just a little brief blip on who we are so you know the context and where I'm coming from with all this information. The Department of Local Affairs is a really small state department. We give out a lot of technical and financial assistance. The Community Development Office, which I manage, has a team of planners, a team of 2 planners, and a Main Street team. I understand you guys are affiliate members of the Main Street programs. I think that's great. We're really excited about the work that the Main Street program does. And, you know, our team really is interested in the intersection between land use planning and it feels like so many other things, you know, hazards, water supply, water quantity and quality, housing, and certainly economic development, downtown revitalization. And so that's why our team is sort of formed together with both the planning and the Main Street team. And so our role is really to provide assistance, both grants and technical assistance, not as planning police or anything like that. We don't review plans or, you know, do any kind of any of that kind of role. It's really more just a clearinghouse and support role. And let's see if I can. Oh, okay. All right. So, sorry, I switched the, give me just a second, I'm sorry. I was hoping to put stuff in the chat. I'll send links out later. All right, so we have a bunch of resources on our webpage. So for those of you that have found our website, the Department of Local Affairs, look for the Planning or Community Development Office web pages. We have a bunch of resources both there and on the Main Street page, including this Downtown Streets Guide, which I think your town is familiar with. We have the Main Street program has put out The Main Thing, which is a guide for communities that are trying to support their businesses through this pandemic. And they have a few different publications, really short, brief publications with examples of what other communities are doing and where they have found some success. And we also have this Planning for Hazards website that we funded. I have to say, this is one of the best tools that I have seen that we've put out and that others have put out. We had a lot of help putting this together from experts in different disciplines and a fantastic consulting team. And they made this tool very detailed, very pragmatic. This guide will walk you through why you plan for hazards, how you plan for hazards, how other people, other communities have been planning, give you sample language, walk you through all kinds of resources. It's just planningforhazards.com. I encourage you to spend some time on it. I think there's some really great information in here. And in fact, there's an interesting tool that they refer to in there called Safe Growth Audits, where you do an audit on all your different policies and regulations and facilities and all those things and think about them through the lens of risk and hazards. And it's a great time right before or during a comp plan to do stuff like that. And then you saw Elizabeth, our state demographer, last week. She did a presentation giving you a lot of data, trends, and projections. I love her presentations. I think they're fantastic. And so hopefully you found that useful. I'm sure she shared the link with you, but remember they have this dashboard on their website. So if you're a data junkie, it's kind of fun to go in there and pull down your county and look at the data and really think about what it says. And again, I'm sure she mentioned this, but if you feel like the data is off somehow, just reach out to her and they'll work with you to fine tune the data so that it's tighter and better. But she, has a bunch of great data on growth, on commuting, on households, just everything. And so you got to see that last week. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but hopefully it gave you a good overview and help set the context a little bit for how you want to focus your work in the comprehensive plan, because a good comp plan really looks at that data and thinks about it and thinks about what it means and how it's going to impact your future. And the comp plan also needs to address that future. So you want to make sure that you're linking the data with the policies. And then I always love the jobs and employment data. I think that's always so interesting. So that's another good thing to really think about before you get into the comp plan. And we can bring more assistance as you guys get closer if you're interested. So enough with the commercial, just so you know kind of who we are and what we do. And then, our regional managers out in the state, like Patrick, are your first connection, your point of contact with our department. But of course, you can reach out to any of us at any time. So let's just do a high level, what is a comprehensive plan? I'll start first with what's required in statutes as far as planning goes. And the three biggies are a comp plan, which I mentioned, the statutes call a master plan. It's really the same thing, the way we talk about it. Counties are required to have subdivision regulations, and towns and cities are required to have a 3-mile plan. And a 3-mile plan can be integrated into your comp plan, or you can keep it standalone. And at the end, if you want a little bit more information about what a 3-mile plan is, I'm happy to talk about that. Okay, so ideally, what happens is, instead of just jumping to solving problems on the fly, coming up with tools that you think might fix the problems, it's really best to take a step back, look at the data, consult your community, and come up with a vision document. And a good vision document, the comp plan makes for a really good vision document. So you come up with a vision statement, you develop a comprehensive plan, which has lots of detail about what the community wants to see, what they feel they need, what kind of plans they have for the future. And then you implement that plan with different tools. And we'll talk more about them, but these are typical tools that you would use to update your comprehensive plan. I get some folks, especially folks that are really pragmatic, which I love. I consider myself a very pragmatic person. I don't like to waste time. I just want to kind of get stuff done and keep moving. And so sometimes I get questions from folks, why can't we just sit down and write it? We know our community, just lock me in a room for a week, I'll write it and I'll pass around the draft. And while truthfully that might work in some cases, you'll leave a lot of folks behind and miss a lot of opportunity to hear from your community, because anyone who sits down and writes it can really only see things through their lens. And you need to hear from the whole community to hear their experiences, their goals, their values, and so on. And you want the community to be part of it so they can see their words in the document. They can see their concerns there. They know they were heard, and they can bring their ideas. Sometimes they have ideas that at first glance we would think, oh, we tried that doesn't work. But having somebody bring up an idea again and looking at it with fresh eyes sometimes really does bring the ideas that we need to hear at the right time. So once you go through an in-depth public engagement process and you have time to hear from the whole community, and that's reflected in the comp plan, the town's going to have a better, more honest plan, and the community is going to be on board and support the plan. And that's great, truthfully. Two main reasons. One, you want active participants when it's time to actually roll up your sleeves and get the work done. And if they feel like it was their idea, their ideas are in there, they were part of it, they're more likely to join in when it's time to implement the plan. Also, I have found that if the community follows along and they feel like the plan reflects, what they want to see, you're going to see fewer angry mobs in some of those public hearings. I don't know if you guys ever get angry mobs in your public hearings. A lot of communities do. And so you'll get fewer of those for projects that come along because there will be a little more predictability on the part of the community and developers and others, businesses, about what the community wants to see and what might be a fight, what might be incongruent with the vision. So ideally, your master plan or your comprehensive plan communicates the whole community's vision and really the intent behind what it is they want to see, the intent behind the regulations, the intent behind the incentive programs, and so on. And a good one will be specific enough that it'll serve as a really strong roadmap and an action plan. And we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go. A comprehensive plan is something that hopefully, if it's well done and it's simple enough, you can pull it out regularly to help you make decisions in a more proactive sense instead of a reactive sense. So if a comprehensive plan is detailed enough, everybody else is going to know how the town board is going to vote on certain items because it's clear, the intent is clear in the comprehensive plan. So you can use it to make decisions about public investments, rezoning, regulations, incentive programs, how to spend some of your public funds, expanding infrastructure, annexation, all of it. So be thinking about this when you're updating your comp plan. If your comp plan isn't giving you enough guidance to help make these decisions, then you're not getting detailed enough. The statutes, I don't usually refer people to the statutes. I find them to be complicated in the way that they word things. But I have to say that the master plan statutes for municipalities and for counties is thorough, and it's practical, and it's easy to follow, and it's really comprehensive in its nature, in its lens. And so I encourage you, if you're interested, to go and look and see back when they wrote that statute, how they envisioned a master plan would be. It truly was envisioned as a comprehensive planning document. And so, you know, it considers all of these different things on the slide. You'll see two of them are starred. Recreation and tourism is the only required element in the state statutes. You have to have a recreation and tourism element. The rest, you decide how you want to talk about these different issues. But if you do have a water element, then there are some new requirements just from this last legislative session that really guide you to be thinking about how a water element is useful. And it's useful if you really consult with the providers in your area and you think about the policies that are going to help you conserve water. You identify the supplies and the facilities that you need to meet the demand, and you talk about that projected demand in the comp plan. And so if you can do all of those things, I think you've got water really well taken care of in the comp plan. Once you get your comp plan done and it's specific, you're going to probably think about a lot of these kinds of tools. This is just a sampling of the kinds of planning tools you can use to implement your comp plan. But all of them should look just a little different, or most of them should look a little different from other communities. You have the opportunity to tailor and customize these standards for these different tools so that it fits your community. But when you're working on the comp plan, don't jump to these tools. You want to think first, be really intentional. What is it we're trying to solve? What is it we're trying to do? And then go to the tools and figure out which ones are really the best fit. Ultimately, your comp plan is an opportunity. It's an opportunity. You're going to be spending a lot of time and money and effort working and talking with the community. So it's an opportunity to really plan proactively, so you're not reacting each time something comes up that you weren't prepared for. And just to give an example on this, the city of Rifle had a vision for its downtown. Many years ago, they noticed that some of the businesses were struggling downtown. So they started to create a pretty complex series of different plans and efforts to address that need to revitalize their downtown. They did things like, once they kind of had a vision for their downtown, they realized that the hardware store was taking really valuable real estate in the walkable core of the downtown. They used their incentive funds to incentivize that hardware store to move a little bit further outside of town, or still in town, but on the outside. And then they could repurpose that lot to and work with some of the public amenities that they were funding to create a walkable core that kind of got people wanting to go downtown. They put their library down there, their town hall down there. Then they brought a movie theater into that old hardware lot. They really had that vision for what they wanted their downtown to be. They came up with all their plans to show and get the community involved and get everybody on board. And then when funding opportunities came along, there was a period there, they were getting so many federal and state funds, they had to hire on help to manage it. Because funders said, oh, this town's got a plan. They know what they want to do. They have stuff that they want to do that we want to fund. And so they got a lot done over a period of like 10, 15 years that really changed their downtown. And they're still making progress, but just an example of that really proactive planning. A good comprehensive plan is also going to put your resources toward objectives, toward your desired outcomes. So another example, you can inadvertently reducing application fees and impact fees for services to help everyone now, or you can charge what's needed to cover the costs, and then any extra funds that you have to go to incentivize things you need can be used, like to incentivize certain businesses, to diversify the economy, or for affordable housing, or so on. And maybe you're doing these things already. You definitely want to have lots of conversations in your comp plan process where you talk about, it's a loaded term now, but smart growth, how you want to grow so that you're being really efficient with the dollars that you have, both in incentives, but also in just providing the day-to-day services that your community needs. And then you definitely want to focus on your existing community first. The more that we do to make our communities improve the quality of life for the folks that are here now, the more other folks want to come and locate. And I think you guys know this too, based on some stuff that I saw in your plans. And then I'll just say sort of the obvious, but just to encourage you to set a realistic number of strategies or actions in your comprehensive plan process. You'll see some examples I'll bring up tonight where some communities get really ambitious and they have long action plans. And I think that's great if they have a lot of staff. But even in communities that have a lot of staff, they can get a little overzealous. And so it's difficult to say no and to prioritize, but I just encourage you to prioritize in your comp plan process so the community knows really where you're going to be putting the bulk of your resources and time. Any questions before I move on to your current plan? Okay. I took just a quick look at your current plan, but the first thing I'll say is, one of the things that I encourage communities to do before they start a comp plan or apply even for funds is to really just sit down and have some conversations. And I'm guessing you guys may have done this already, but if you haven't already, go back and look at that comp plan that you already have from, I think it's 10 years ago, and see how much has been implemented. How much has changed either in circumstances or in values. Sometimes you get new folks coming in or crazy new things like the year 2020 happen and just change the values that we have for our community, and that they can make the old plan feel a little less relevant. Consider the data that Elizabeth provided last week. Are there new data or trends that you need to plan for that maybe weren't really thoroughly considered in that last plan? And also maybe ask around, does the community know what's in that plan? Because even if it is still relevant, it may be time to sort of get everybody engaged again and really hear from them. Is this still what we want? Do we want to do more or different? And then also, are the resources and partners, are there resources and partners available right now to update the plan? These are the kinds of things I encourage you to think about and talk about as a team. And then, finally, I'll ask, what's driving the desire to update the plan? Sometimes we jump to, it's time to update the plan, and maybe you don't need to update it. I would say 10 years, it's likely you need to do an update, but I have seen some communities that say, nope, we're still going strong. We've got our action plan. It's 15 years old, but we still have some things to do, and we've polled the community and it sounds like the values are still the same. And so I'll leave that for you guys to discuss. When I looked through the plan, just very quickly again, some things that stood out for me, I really loved the school involvement. I think that's great. A lot of communities talk about doing it, but then it's just one of those things that they run out of time and they don't. And you guys all know this. It's great to get the kids involved and see your community through a different set of eyes. But also it's great because then they go home and they talk about it to their families, and then the families start to become more involved. So I love that vision survey. I love that you had a diverse community working group, a steering group or working group. I can't remember what you called it. I think that's a really good strategy. I love that you examine the assets and the hazardous areas. Obviously, we at DOLA have been putting a lot of resources into that. And so it makes me happy to see communities doing that. At the time, you were one of a very small handful that did that. So I think that's great. I also like that you spend a lot of time and effort thinking about how to diversify the economy and make it year round, and spend some time really thinking about what that meant. And I saw a lot of different values and issues come up, like the business-friendly approach, infrastructure and utilities planning, that's great. Activating those vacant lots, really spend some time thinking about how to strategically deal with that issue, that's awesome. A lot of issues that we see elsewhere, like ATVs, night sky, solar access, heritage preservation, downtown revitalization, those are things we see here and there. I love the natural resources focus on protecting the tundra and protecting the water. I thought that was really good to see. And there's more here. And I definitely like that the county was a partner and that you did it together. I think that makes sense, especially in a case like yours where you guys are so linked. And so those were some of my observations. I'm curious from you guys, I'd love to hear from you now. And truthfully, it's a small enough group, you can just unmute rather than use the chat. I'd love to hear from you. What do you like about the comp plan that you have now? What did you like about the process, or what do you like about the look and feel? Any of the goals, just anything really that you want to mention. And I hate to put you on the spot, but maybe staff can lead us off first.
We had a lot of community involvement in the 2010 master plan. I wasn't working for the town and county then, but a large portion of the community was involved. And I think that the comp plan that we have right now, most of it is still relevant. It just seems like we were lacking on the ability to implement a lot of it. And that might be because we have such a limited staff and limited budget over the years, with just a handful of people working for town hall and a handful of people for the county, and a relatively small tax base, like 600 residents and so many visitors to handle. So we have such a small population. So we have limited staff and limited disposable income, if you will. So the implementation has been lacking.
That's helpful. Thank you. Does anybody else want to throw out something quick? Anything that Lisa didn't already mention?
I really like how the plan, it shows that Silverton is a diverse group of people. And I think it really represents a lot of different people's ideas and visions and values. And so I like that part of it. And we plan on keeping that, as a strong part of it. But it just feels like we need to refresh and get out there and talk to people again to hear the variety of perspectives.
That's good. Thank you. Okay. In the interest of time, I'll continue on. But thank you for that. I think those were good. And kind of gives the sense that an update might be a little faster to do because so much of it still is relevant, but a refresh, get more buy-in and other folks involved is probably a good plan. Well, I'm going to cover some trends real quick. These are just some trends that I'm seeing. You might be seeing some others as well. I think Elizabeth probably did a great job of talking about the aging demographic, and that's something that a lot of communities are really struggling with right now, or focusing on, I'll say. How do we plan so that folks can age in place and stay at home? They don't have to leave our communities. There's so much work involved in that. So your comprehensive plan really can address a lot of those issues. It's a perfect place really to talk about housing and transportation and different services. So that we're starting to see more and more of that, and I'm really glad for that. I'm sure a lot of you have seen comprehensive plans, or communities spend a lot of time creating policies that address things like public health, and not just now with COVID, but even before, we were talking about how do we get people to walk more, take transit, things like that. And general livability, quality of life. I'm very happy to see that more communities are integrating hazards into their comprehensive plans, and now even climate change directly, just directly talking about that, especially as they see it affecting their communities. We're seeing a lot more communities now plan for both water supply as well as water quality, which is fantastic, because I think all of us are starting to see that issue is becoming more and more urgent. Especially on the Front Range, we're seeing tap fees now go up to like $60,000 per tap for water. And so it's definitely an issue of water shortage, or at least competition for water. I think communities have been doing a nice job over many years now addressing affordable housing, but I really see communities step up their game lately and get much more detailed and specific about what they mean when they say we want to support affordable housing. And so I think your plan does that now, and a lot of plans are doing such a great job of that. Also, diversification of the economy. A lot of comp plans are addressing the role of the community and how we can do that. And equity, we're really seeing a lot of that now, and I'm interested to see how that evolves over time. Some tips that I'll leave, some best practices that I think are really important. Effective comp plans are going to spend time, like I mentioned before, really looking at the data and incorporating what they learn from that data into the comp plan. Those vision statements and clear policies and very specific strategies or actions are helpful. One of the biggest disservice that I see consultants do is let communities get away with, sometimes when things get rough, let communities get away with very vague policy language and strategy language, because it's easier that way to just get it adopted. But then you have sort of a milquetoast plan that doesn't really say what you meant. And so it's better to have less and have more detail than to have sort of everything that feels nice. It includes all kinds of language about everything, but says really nothing. So that's another best practice I want to encourage. Of course, I don't want to read all of these, but you definitely want to reflect, and someone said this already, the vision of the whole community. I like when communities really wrestle with the short-term gains versus the long-term gains, how we sometimes unintentionally subsidize growth. I definitely love when communities have an implementation plan. It's a really transparent tool that helps us all remember what we said we were going to do and stay focused on it. And so I'll give some examples of some of those implementation plans or action plans. And you know, again, just considering the resources that are needed for implementation. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The bottom line, if you get asked from your community members, why are we doing this? Why are we spending time and money on updating a comprehensive plan? Folks love to say that plans sit on the shelf, and they sometimes do, and that's horrible. And we all hate when that happens. But if we do it right, they won't sit on the shelf. So the bottom line, why you update your plan, it saves you money, it creates efficiencies. And right now, we all have to be focused on that. It provides predictability, both for the folks who are there, the businesses and the residents, but also lenders and developers. They have a sense for what can get approved. if your comprehensive plan is very specific. And then if it's implemented through your land use regulations. And then also, the bottom line reason is it gets the community on goals rather than reacting to political whims or sometimes the loudest voices that show up at the public hearings. We don't want that to be how our system works. We want it to be much more inclusive of everyone's voices. And then a good comprehensive plan, and this gets to your refresh point, a good comp plan generates momentum and excitement. It reminds people what it is we're trying to do and why and how, and then who can help. And so the more you get stakeholders involved from the very, very beginning, so they feel more ownership in the plan and more responsibility for what's in the plan, the more results I think you'll tend to get. So just a little quote here for you all. But I'm gonna move forward so we can have time at the end for discussion. All right, so this is the part where I'm gonna go through it fairly quickly, but I wanted to just give you an idea of some different examples. The town of Bennett is over on the eastern part of the Front Range. It's a very small town. I'm sorry, I know you can't read all of this, but I'm throwing them out so you can kind of see the look and feel, and then I'll tell you a little bit about them. Bennett is one of a small handful of communities that has decided to take a totally different approach. They have a more brochure-like format to their plan. Very simple, very short. It's 10 pages. I think if you fold it, maybe it's like 20, but it's very short, very succinct. The action plan is brief, to say the least. They have guiding principles. They have a vision statement. They have the different elements of the plan, like transportation or housing or infrastructure, but they have just, an achievable goal, a key strategy, some kind of catalytic action, and then maybe a policy directive for each element. So pretty brief action plan, and really allowed Bennett to focus on a handful of high priority actions. All right, Ridgeway just updated their plan fairly recently, so I thought I'd give you a snapshot of theirs. I like a lot of things that Ridgeway did with theirs. They provided a summary. I know that sounds small, but folks aren't going to read your plan. I mean, I hate to say it, but they're just not. I mean, we find it difficult to read our plans, right? And we're invested and involved, but they're long and we're busy. So having a summary that's really visual and easy to scan is key, because one of the main things about your comp plan, it's not only a policy document and a work plan, it's a communication tool. And so you want people to be able to look at it and think about it, even if it's just high level. So they did a summary. I think it's great. They made it easier and faster to read. They have their vision statement. That's key. They have values. And then they get into more specific goals and policies. And then they have an action plan at the end, which I'll show you. They have a section called the growth framework, where they added things like annexation policies, land use characteristics by neighborhood, and things like that, which I found just a different and interesting way to present the information. But you'll see some of their goal statements around housing, like maintaining the town as accessible to a range of all income levels, ages, and households. I thought that was great language. They talk about encouraging a diversity of housing options to meet all those diverse needs. And they have other goal statements and actions in there, which you'll see. So on the screen here, I just have little excerpts. I have an excerpt from some of their, one of their goal statements and some of the policies that relate to those different goal statements. You'll see they have a text box. It's, again, easy for scanning, that defines some of the terms that they're throwing around that people sometimes get confused, like what's affordable housing versus workforce housing. I thought that was great. It gets people to really understand what we're talking about. And then they have an action plan separate that ties back to those goals and objectives and gets much more specific. It gives you what the action item is or the strategy is, who's responsible, who's the lead, and who are the partners. I think that's really key, saying who the lead is and who the partners are, especially for a community your size. You probably will benefit from something like that. And then they have the timing. When do they want to get things done by? Some communities say this quarter or this year. Ridgeway says this is a short-term thing and this is a long-term thing, and these are things that are just going to keep going. One more, sort of some screenshots from Ridgeway's plan. They addressed hazards. So I like how they did this. They have some actions and strategies or strategies. They talk about things like identifying opportunities to introduce redundancies into infrastructure systems. They talk about the need to define steep slopes in their development code. They want to work with FEMA and the county to maintain an up-to-date 100-year floodplain maps. They get specific about, you know, how they're going to meet some of these broad goal statements like proactively mitigate natural and human-made hazards. They say exactly what they mean, which I think is helpful for everyone to see how the local government will be focusing its efforts. And this is just a screenshot to give you a little bit better blown up version or look at their action plan, just so you can see it a little bit better. All right, Mancus, one of the things that they did, they summarized right in the beginning, almost like a table of contents, their sections or elements of their plan, like environment or infrastructure, the goal statements that fall in each of those elements, and then their objectives under that. So it's a nice place for people to scan and see. They can scan and see what matters to them and then focus more time on that. I think that's again, as a communications tool, this is an easy strategy to get people to look at your plan, get involved in your plan, react to the drafts, and so on. Okay, whoops. All right, I have Hayden in here too. They took a little bit different approach in their formatting, but again, they have goal statements, they have policies, they focus on different elements, you know, and they've got an action plan that's much more simplified. But again, they get specific about what it is they're trying to do and why. And remember, the why is really important because you're communicating the intent. You're communicating what you heard from the community about what it is they're trying to do, why you're doing these different things. And so that's really helpful. I threw in just a couple of county examples. I know there's no way you can see this. It's really super small, but I thought it was interesting how Larimer presented theirs. Theirs is super complicated. They're a big county with a lot of different issues, but you know, they've got lots of different ways that they present the information that I think is helpful, lots of pictures and things like that, that make it easy for people to scan and see where what matters to them fits in the plan, and where their parcel sometimes fits in the plan. All right, and then Gunnison, I just wanted to give you Gunnison County's as a little screenshot from their action plan. They included quite a bit of detail and just a ton of strategies. They'll be busy for some time, but they took a very comprehensive approach and I think got a lot of excitement because they had a very long and detailed public engagement process. And so maybe they were able to do a little bit more in their action plan because they got just involvement from so many different groups. All right, that was a bit fast, but rather than get into the weeds and give you tons of examples and think about policies before you've had a chance to really think about policies that matter to you, I just wanted to give you a sampling. And at this point, if anybody would like to take a minute and just very succinctly say, you know, why do you want to update the plan? What are you hoping to achieve or address with an update? We heard a little bit about we need a refresh. You know, just get the community immersed in some of these discussions about some of the issues again. Any other reasons that you guys want to update the plan? You can unmute and join in.
Sure, this is Shane. I think it'd be really helpful to have something that reflects the current community, which may very well be similar to the 2010 plan, but have that refresh so that the town can refer to the master plan in its planning and decision making, similar to what the county does now. It feels like the plan at least is perceived as a little stale, so that if we do reference that, there may not be as much support in that reference. And then I also think we're now living in some of the results of the targets that were in the 2010 master plan, things that were prospective then and current now. And it would be helpful to be able to revisit those issues with this new perspective. And I think the last thing that I think about is that plan seemed incredibly optimistic, which I think is awesome, but it would be nice to have a plan that is more achievable as opposed to just being visioning.
Okay, those are good comments. Thank you. Yeah, we want it to feel relevant. We don't want it to feel so outdated that it just doesn't seem relevant anymore. Anybody else?
This is Sue. Yeah, I think our demographics are shifting pretty radically. Well, nothing's very radical in Silverton, but this summer has been an overwhelming, just eye opener. You know, and I think we're starting to realize we have different dynamics going on in the summertime versus the wintertime, and just a fair number of new families, new people who were really interested in making a change also.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Anything else? All right. We can come back to it more too if you have an idea that you want to throw out. Well, let's spend a little bit of time talking about steps and mechanics. Again, I'm going to talk high level because once you decide what you're going to do, yes, we're going to move forward and this is how we're going to do it. We can come back and revisit the steps in greater detail. But for now, I just wanted to give you sort of a high level overview of some of the steps. First, our funding policies. If you come to DOLA for funding support to help pay for hiring a consultant, if that's the way you go to update the comp plan, then we have some policies that we've just learned from working with communities over decades. Frankly, I think we're the biggest funder of comp plans in Colorado. We've just learned from communities, you know, gosh, I wish we would have done this. Gosh, I wish we would have done that. And so over the years, once we've heard those messages enough, we just add it to our policies just so that everybody kind of learns from everyone else's experience. So the first funding policy we have is for all grants, dollar for dollar match. So I think you may already know that. And Patrick will talk to you more about all of these different policies, but specifically on the planning policies, no surprise, we want communities to definitely spend time thinking about hazards, both identifying them and really integrating the policies and actions that are going to address what they learned about the data, about the hazards in their community into their comprehensive plans. So we have all kinds of resources and more guidance on how to do that. You've already done some of that in your comp plan, but we're happy to share those resources. 3-mile plans, remember that's one of those few things that's actually required in the statutes. So we definitely want you to do that as part of your comp plan process. Again, it can be standalone document or it can be just integrated into your comp plan. A lot of communities do it that way. We want to have you guys have intergovernmental agreements with the county in this case. It just makes sense to have some kind of joint review, even if it's just informational only. And maybe you have that already. If you do, maybe now's a good time to think about, you know, what more could we do so that we're really working together. I don't know if you have this in Silverton, but in pretty much everywhere, every community that I've worked with, folks will shop the deals, right? They're going to come to Silverton and see how much time and money would it cost to get this project through. They're going to go to the county, see what it's going to be there. They're going to go to other jurisdictions around you, shop it there. And so it's nice to have agreements with at least the county about where certain growth will go and won't go so that you're not getting sort of played off each other. So IGAs are really important and helpful back, you know, again, trying to be efficient with the resources and taxpayer resources that we have. IGAs are a great way to do that. And then we do want you to assess the housing need that you have and address those housing needs, both affordable and otherwise. And so addressing affordable housing is not a hard sell in Colorado right now. Everybody's trying to address how do we get more affordable and workforce housing. And I think that's great. Water supply and quality, I mentioned this earlier. This is not necessarily a requirement in statute, but we're requiring it now because we see the need, it's really important. And then there's some guidance in the statute about how to do that. Make sure you're thinking about water conservation. You guys are already doing a lot of this, so I don't think this is a reach for you at all. And then the other thing that we like to ask your consultant to do for you is to take the time to look at your new comp plan once you've got it, and look at your existing land use code, and then give you some recommendations for where you're going to need to update that land use code. So it just saves you a little bit of time and effort, and it gives you a very focused work plan to go update your land use regulations to reflect the new comp plan that you adopt, so that they're in sync. I know folks will spend the year or two, however long it takes you to update your comp plan, and they get really excited about some of the policies that you adopt. And then inevitably some project comes along right in that time space between the time when you adopt the comp plan and the time when you adopt the updated land use regulations to reflect the comp plan. And so stuff sometimes sneaks in there before you've updated the land use regulations, and people get upset about that. And so it's good to just be able to make that as quick of a process as possible. And then we encourage some things too. We don't require that you do update those land use regulations as soon as you can right after you update your comp plan. We encourage you strongly to plan for your aging demographic and any of your changing demographics. And then, you know, we're really going to be spending a lot of time this next year sharing best practices and lessons learned from communities about different engagement strategies to really hear from both underrepresented voices and all voices right now, but especially underrepresented ones in the pandemic. These Zoom meetings are difficult, and a lot of folks can't do them or don't want to do them. And so how do you hear from the whole community? And so, you know, we definitely encourage you to think a lot about how to do that. And you know your community well, so you can come up with strategies in consultation with your consultants too. So steps to get started, research, go look at other plans, spend some time looking at the plan that you have, discuss as a group your goals and your desired outcomes. What do you want to see out of this plan update? And then I know this sounds ridiculous, but create a plan for the plan. There's a planner in Evans that did the most detailed plan for the plan I've ever seen. It's really something. She did a great job, but when it's done well, your plan for the plan really maps out. It's like a work plan, a really intentional, thoughtful work plan for, okay, if we want this kind of plan at the end of the day, what are all the things that we need to do and when, and who's going to do them to make sure that we get that plan we want. So a plan for the plan is really helpful. Who's going to do what pieces? Who's going to write the RFP? Who's going to sit down and come up with all the questions that we're going to ask? How are we going to engage all these different stakeholders in our community? It's an important piece. And I have apply for DOLA funding in gray there because you may decide you don't need to apply for funding, so it's not a given. But if you do decide to apply for funding to help support this plan effort, this is about when you would do that. You'd want enough of a scope of work that you can go get a budget estimate. And then there are some things, number 4, I have a star here because you can do this step at this point, or you can wait, hire your consultant and then do it with them. But at some point you will be doing some of that preliminary background work, like coming up with guiding principles, doing your visioning, doing your community surveys, having your stakeholder interviews. Yes, you can hire your consultant to do all of those things. Some communities break it up and do some of that work early in the process themselves so that they are sure to take the time that's needed to get that kind of input. But in any case, once you develop your RFP, run it by us. We want to make sure that you're protected and have all the requirements that we require of you in your contract with your consultant ultimately. So we want to make sure it's in the RFP to protect you. And then after you have your RFP and you get your bids, you'll want to do your interviews, check references. I have to pause here. I can't tell you actually how many times I've encouraged communities to check references, specifically because I knew that the consultant that they were interested in. Other communities had problems with them, and they still didn't check the references. And I can't endorse or say anything positive or negative about any consultants. That's not my place. But if you check your references and check around to some of the communities that consultant's been serving, you'll get good information that will help you decide if that consultant is the right fit for your community and will be able to deliver what it is you want. Ultimately, then you select your consultant, you create your contract, you make it as specific as you can, and you get very clear on the expectations, both that they have of you and that you have of them. And then you begin your process, ensure frequent check-ins and reviews with the consultant, the staff, the planning commission, this working group, the electeds. You need lots of check-ins, at least managed by staff, so that everyone is coming along the whole way, step by step. What you don't want is folks to feel like they checked in at the beginning, they checked in at the draft, and they saw the result at the end. You want to make sure that everyone is aware of and contributing all the way through. And I will say that hiring a consultant, just managing that process as staff, is a big job. And sometimes it's a large part of the planner's job. And so you might consider whether or not you need to hire out contract help for a little while for some development review or any of that kind of stuff. In the case of, let's say, if Lisa decides to manage this, if you guys decide to have Lisa manage it. So just a note there. And then overall, the steps to create a comp plan, it's different for every community based on what you want to see and what your consultant advises, but this is a typical process. You definitely want to make sure that you're gathering and analyzing your data. We've talked about that. And then there's a part in the process where you, of course, you do your vision statement so that that guides all the rest of the work. But you identify your issues, your challenges, your opportunities. That helps people understand. It's important, even though it feels fluffy sometimes, because it helps people understand why you're doing this and what it is this plan can do. And so from that, you develop your vision, you develop your goals. You get even more specific than those goal statements by developing policies. And then you get even more specific under those policies by developing strategies that are going to implement those policies and goals. And so, hopefully that's a thorough and detailed process so that it's really clear what it is you're saying. Sometimes consultants at this point will prepare options or scenarios that they run by the community. Well, based on what you're telling me, your plan can look kind of like this kind of growth scenario or this kind of growth scenario, or they give 3 scenarios. And then they ask for feedback to pick which of those scenarios the community thinks fits better. Some folks don't do that. Some consultants just keep it much more organic. They don't force the community through scenarios. Just depends on what you guys decide is appropriate. But in any case, the process is designed to help you narrow, prioritize, and get very clear on where the community broadly supports actions and strategies. And so you go through several drafts, you complete and adopt your plan, and then hopefully you have an action plan as part of that comprehensive plan. That's how you keep track of the implementation work. And I showed you some examples. It's usually just a simple table that reminds everyone what the goals were, what the policies and strategies were, who's in charge, and when you're going to have it done by. And it's important to monitor and update the progress. And usually the Planning Commission is in charge of making sure that they do that the community does that. You can decide to have your working group stay on and continue to monitor over time. It's really up to you how you want to do that. The process tends to take about a year or 2. Some communities can do it in less than a year. I've seen 6 months is the fastest, but it feels rushed. So the community has to be on board for a faster timeline than that. If it's longer than 2 years, people start to fade in and out, lose interest. So you'll want to set up a timeline that seems to work with the dynamics of your community. I just have a few process examples. I find examples make it a little bit more real and tangible. So you can look in most comp plans that communities adopt will have a section near the beginning that detail the process that they used for public engagement. So when you're looking at different comp plans, take a look and see what other communities did. I find it really interesting to see what different folks do and what I think would work like in my community in Littleton. But Ridgeway, they appointed a steering committee, and they said very specifically from the beginning, you guys are the sounding board. You're not steering committee as in steering the progress. You are the sounding board. That's what we need you for. And I thought that was a helpful definition and clarification. They spent a lot of time on focus groups with stakeholders, and they talked about key topics, issues, maybe sometimes controversial, to really feel out where the community was at on different issues. And they had them with council members, with the planning commission members, with the steering committee, and with different stakeholder groups. They had some community events. Community events are tough right now with the pandemic, but some communities are still finding out ways to do them, leaving kiosks and boards, bulletin boards where people leave sticky notes or stickers or whatever. There's ways to do it. But you want some kind of interactive event for folks to be able to both tell you how they feel about what you're presenting and also see what other people are feeling and saying. Community surveys are another really great way to do this. I think having a community survey is really key because that's just more people tend to fill out a survey and so then come to meetings. And so surveys are helpful when it comes down to the time where you're getting some of those louder voices that aren't feeling heard. It's nice to be able to point to that community survey and say, well, 80% of the 200 people that responded to this survey said this, and that's contrary to what I'm hearing from you, but just so you know, this is what we're going with. So community surveys are helpful. Open houses are much more helpful than a series of public hearings. For a variety of reasons that we can get into, especially if you're worried about a controversial process. And community events can look very different. They can be potlucks, they can be just all kinds of different things. You can use online surveys, you can use emailed surveys, one question email surveys. Manitou Springs did that for their comp plan process. I thought that was brilliant. Everybody has time to answer one question over a text or an email, but they may not answer 20 questions in a longer survey. So they use that at different points to both get input and generate interest again in the comp plan as it was going through its process. They used youth engagement, they had a draft plan review workshop, and then they had their formal adoption process. So that's what Ridgeway did. Grand Lake has this visual in their comp plan that talked about the policy framework and how they got from their vision statement to their prioritized actions. And they used a heart and soul process. Cortez has also used this, other communities have used it. If you're interested, I can send you more information about that. That's from the Orton Family Foundation. Grand Lake has this other sort of visual timeline, which I thought was really helpful as a communication device that talked about how they broke down their process, what the community is going to be focusing on when. It helps the community members figure out how and when to get involved and what's going to happen at what time. So, you know, this is something that you might want to consider. And I know it's really hard to see. Okay, so those are some examples of process and how you do it. But public engagement, again, is key from the very beginning to the very end, and even after, to maintain support for some of the projects that you're still working on 1, 2, 5, 10 years later. So let's talk a little bit about reducing the cost. I know that a lot of communities are struggling right now to come up with sufficient funds to update their comp plans, but a lot of them are feeling like they need to right now. They would like to wait until everyone in the community can feel safe to participate, but some communities need to do it now because so much has changed. So I have in the little box on the upper right some budgets, some costs for different recent comp plans, just to give you an idea of what some of the costs have been in different areas around the state. I know some have been cheaper, but I can't find those numbers. I feel like there was a community that did one recently for 25,000, but I think they took a lot of the work on themselves. So in thinking about reducing the cost, and can anyone not see the table on the top right? Can you see it? Okay, good. So rather than read those figures, let's just talk about what are some things you can do to reduce the cost. Let's say you come up with your scope of work that you want, you run it by some different consultants to get a good idea of what a budget would look like, and it comes in way higher than you need. These are some of the things that other communities have done. Consider what you can do in-house with the resources that you have, the very strapped resources that you have or some of your partners have. And think about your regional COG, your different, like maybe your chamber or different groups that can help out. But some communities do some of that background and demographic updates on their own. It's just a small thing that they can take off the table of the consultant to reduce costs, but it's something. You can use students sometimes to do this portion. The community survey and some of the stakeholder engagement, like for the vision statement, for instance, very common for communities to do that to save money and to take a little bit more time. Truthfully, the biggest thing you can do to keep your scope, to keep your cost down is have a very clear scope of work in your RFP and then stick to it. What we've seen is consultants will pad budgets where they feel like they're not really sure where this might go, and they're worried about cost overruns. So if you can convey clearly that this is exactly what we expect, and this is our timeline, and these are the resources, and really be super clear so they have that confidence in giving you the lowest possible bid they can, that's going to do a lot to help you keep your costs down. You may even have to prioritize different elements and aspects that you want to see in your plan and negotiate that if necessary. So what I encourage you to do is to put out your full scope of work that you want to see. So for instance, we want to have at least 3 community engagement events. We want to have at least stakeholder interviews, and we want to, really be clear about all the different elements that you want and so on. And then if your costs come back a little too high, you can always negotiate and say, all right, well, if we scrap this piece and this piece, then what could you come in, could you meet our price here? So that's another way you might be able to do it. It's a little bit more later in the game. It's a little riskier, but that is one way you might be able to do it. Certainly narrowing the scope, focusing on just a sub area at a time could work. In your case, I think that's a little trickier. You could break it up into different elements. I struggle with that too. Like, oh, this year we're going to do transportation and housing, and next year we're going to do infrastructure. I find that is one way to do it. Communities have done that. It does make it harder to be really comprehensive in your thinking. So I'll just say that. You can break it up into phases though, maybe by half year or by year, to break it up into bite-sized chunks that you can fund a little bit at a time. Mentioned students. And then finally, just once it is finally adopted and you feel like the plan is refreshed, it does reflect with the community that you have today, you can review and tweak that plan every year. That's not, you can't do it forevermore. It'll buy you some time. Eventually you will have to do an overhaul again, but it does buy you a little bit of time before you have to do that overhaul. Any questions on the steps before we go just a few slides on public engagement? I'm getting close to the end. Okay. All right, let's get into public engagement. I mentioned this is so important, and the really, I think, the toughest part of this, and I'm glad to hear that you had really strong citizen engagement in your last plan. That's a good indicator of the kind of engagement you might get this time. The biggest first thing is to reach out to the stakeholders that provide services, like your different utility service providers. If you have a housing authority, the Council of Government, any of your nonprofits that provide services, your school district. I think it's great you have the principal on this working group. That's going to be really key because they're going to have valuable information that you need. They're going to have really valuable insight, and they're your partners that are going to help you implement your work plan or your action plan. So identify who all your stakeholder groups are including, different charity groups and different groups that just focus on maybe one event or fundraising, because they might also be able to help you engage some of their members to get input and feed it back to the town so that you don't have to go to every single group yourself. And then, think about who are your residents and how do they get information? Do you have residents that are in town only certain times of year? Think about that when you come up with your public engagement strategy. How do they get their information? Do they use the website a lot? Do they use email? Is there a town bulletin board that gets used a lot? Will people, if you put a draft document in the library, will someone go and look at it? I mean, just think about, all the different ways you get information and give information in your community. And remember too, to think about giving information and getting information in bite sizes, right? So small chunks. In this case, the example is, I mentioned Manitou Springs. They had those email surveys. I think they were once a week or once a month. And it kind of got shared information and got information from the community a little bit at a time so people could focus on the issues. It's what I hate to see is when communities get rushed and they ask for feedback on a 200-page document and they give everyone a week and you have to go online and look at it. That's just not effective. And even the most, what's the word I'm looking for? The folks that feel the strongest will have a tough time doing that. So figure out how you can break stuff down the best that you can. And also be thinking about, in all of the work that you're doing, how do you talk about why what this is even matters? Because most people hear comp plan and they're like, well, I don't have any big issues, so I'm fine. I'm not gonna get involved. But if you brought the issues to them one by one, they probably would have quite a bit of opinions. So it's important to think about how to talk about this effort so that it resonates with people, so they care and they understand why they should care and why it matters. And finally, just go to them as much as you can. Go to other virtual meetings of different groups. Go to the coffee shop, wherever people are gathering. I'm not sure how it is in your community or how it will be this winter, but be thinking about the different strategies to get input. And also remember that getting input is most helpful when it's preceded by an exchange of information. So one thing I see sometimes that is frustrating for me as a resident in my community, I think it's more helpful for me, instead of just asking me in a survey how I feel about certain policies, it's more helpful for me to get the context first and get a little education for myself. So then I understand a little bit more about why it matters and how I feel. So that's just another piece of advice I'll give. All right, a couple of examples. If you haven't heard about Gunnison's One Valley Prosperity Project, their comp plan that they did, go online and read about that. They did a really different approach that was necessary and important at the time that they did it. They came up with just a lot of really different ways to engage the community, including some ways that I see you guys used in your plan before, and then some other stuff. So I'll share this presentation with you so you can look at some of these examples later, but in the interest of time, I'll just mention a couple of them. Those short surveys on the website, surveys at the grocery store or at the bars or the coffee shops, really did turn out to give them input that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So super helpful. Another example here, just it's kind of some fun different things, Chalk Talk. They had a mobile chalkboard that they kind of went around to different groups and let people write, sort of value-based statements and take a picture, and then they could post that up on the website so other people can see how other people feel, not just be focused on their own values and thoughts on some of the issues. They had meeting in a box. I think that's really valuable. I'm happy to talk more about that. They had forums. They had discussions at senior centers and so on. They really went the extra mile to get everybody involved and get input from everyone. And in the end, that plan is really valued by that community. They cling to that plan. They want to see that plan adopted and implemented, and they have a lot of support from different groups. So just a recap, review your current plan, consider it carefully. Why do you want to update it? What do you want to see in your refresh? Create your plan for the plan. Look at the data, analyze it, think about what it means and how it should impact the policies that you adopt in the future. Create that broad group of active partners and champions so that they help you inform the plan and then actually implement it. Engage all the voices. Your action plan should be realistic and focused so that it's not overwhelming and everybody just sort of gives up under the weight of it. And then think about how you're going to be implementing that plan through different things like land use regulations, incentives, and different programs. And you know, another thing that I haven't mentioned yet, it's really important to celebrate and communicate the successes that you have all along the way. So once you adopt your plan, celebrate that. And then every time you implement something, no matter how small, you know, celebrate it and let people know that you did and remind them that it was this goal statement or this strategy or this action in the comp plan. It just reminds people, oh yeah, the comp plan, we're implementing that. I'm in charge of one of those. I need to go focus on that. So definitely want to celebrate and communicate regularly. All right. What's next? I've mentioned some of these things. You might want to review our webpage on comprehensive plans. We have some resources that you'll see here. Again, I can share all these links in an email and you can forward it out if you like. But a lot of resources like primers, examples from other communities. Consult with your service providers and your nonprofits to help you create that plan for the plan, how you're going to do it and how you're going to involve folks. You definitely want not just partners, but champions. So you want to make sure you have 2 or 3 champions that are going to really help you spread the word, get people involved. And it can't be you guys. You guys are already internal champions. You've got to find some external champions that are going to help you keep the momentum up. And, you know, it works great if you can find people that have been in the community a long time, that are loved and respected, businesses that people enjoy. It's nice to have champions like that to help you keep the momentum going and get things implemented. Once you create your plan for the plan and your scope of work, or at least the beginning of your plan for the plan and your scope of work, apply for funding. I encourage you to apply to us for funding. Talk to Patrick about strategy, develop that RFP. And, you know, just check in with us at any time along the way. We're happy to break this stuff down more, send you more examples, and just talk through issues and questions with you. Casey is our senior planner. She wasn't able to join tonight, but I have her info here for you guys. She's your main point of contact. I loved this picture, so I had to throw it in here from your old plan. Thank you for the work that you're doing on this. I know how much work this is. It's a lot, it's overwhelming. It's really hard to make progress. And so that's why I encourage communities to just hire some help. Otherwise, it's really difficult. I think I only know of 1 or 2 communities that didn't have a large staff that did it on their own without consulting help. It's just a big project. So kudos to you all for having a diverse working group committee that's focused on it. That's going to be key to success for sure. And I'll just open it up at this time now for any questions that you guys have. I'm happy to go back through anything that I've mentioned or something that I haven't.
Oh, thank you. That was a huge amount of information in a very quick period of time. I feel like every single bullet point on most of the slides, we could have spent, you know, an hour talking about it. Like, how do you do that? What does that mean?
Yeah.
So I think we'll probably be reaching out to you frequently. Yeah. Any questions, comments, discussion?
And am I still sharing? I was trying to unshare. I'm not sharing
No, you're good.
now,
You're good.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Melissa? You're muted. You're still muted.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, what is the 3 mile plan? I don't know what that is.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So a 3-mile plan came about because back in the 80s, there were a few municipalities that were annexing like crazy. And folks in the county got upset and worked up over it. And so they had their state legislators pass a restriction on annexing. And the restriction in the statute says cities, towns can't annex more than 3 miles outside of their current boundary. So 3 miles is a lot for Silverton. It's not a lot for Aurora, for instance, right? But that's the measure that they came up with, the threshold. So it's a restriction first. You can't annex out more than 3 miles in any given year. But the second part is probably more important. Besides that, besides the restriction, you have to have a plan for how you're going to service growth in that area. So your 3-mile plan, a lot of county residents fear that it's the plan that the town has to annex all the land within 3 miles of their current boundaries. That is not what it is, but that's how people hear it. But really what it is it says, we as a town have decided that in this area, 3 miles outside of our town's boundaries, this area we want to grow, this area doesn't make sense for us to grow. And in these areas where we think we could grow, here's how we would provide services to those areas. And so it's just some thought given to how would you, if you were to annex, how would you provide services to that area? Does that help?
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
I'm pretty curious just to hear general feedback on the presentation from Jess and Melissa and Lisa, who have been involved in the process longer than the rest of us. Lisa Adair, I mean.
I thought it was a wonderful presentation. I don't even know which part I liked the best. It was a lot of helpful info. I think previously I was expecting that lock yourself in a room and get it done. That was kind of what I was going to be doing, since I was sort of tasked with just updating the master plan. And I kind of just walked in at the tail end of when the planning commission had been working on it, and we just lost all that information when the previous planner left. So I was figuring on doing the lock yourself in a room and update it version of the master plan update, just because, yeah, so we have our work cut out for us, but I think we're starting with a good document, and the information tonight was extremely helpful to me. Thank you.
Sure thing. Yeah, I'm glad you don't have to lock yourself in a room. That's not helpful for you. I went ahead and put some links in here, but I'll still share them in an email too, because I referenced a lot of resources.
Andy, I have a question about community engagement. We've done quite a bit of it around the trails planning process and the Kendall Mountain Master Plan process. And we keep bumping up against statements in the community that we haven't engaged people enough. And I'm just curious to know if there are rules of thumb as far as percentage of community members engaged. What looks like good community engagement? You know, in a community this size, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground and a lot of territory in those efforts. And, you know, I'm hopeful that as this master planning process moves forward and updating that again, we're able to get really good community engagement on that. And I just don't know, in larger communities or other communities of this size, is there a rule of thumb for what we should be looking for in terms of numbers reached?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that there's a magic percentage or a magic standard that you'd have to reach, because it just depends on so many different factors. I'll say this: if you do that plan for the plan, the strategic thinking of who are the most important stakeholders and people that we need to engage for this plan. And then you make sure you've done everything you can to reach out to them. You've done the bulk of the work right there. And then as far as beyond that, just doing your best to reach out in different aspects, some online, some in person, some, more traditional ways. Then you're kind of meeting everybody where they're at as much as you can. Beyond that, beyond doing all the stuff that you've done, and I'm happy to talk more and brainstorm different approaches, and you can look at some of the examples that I showed. I think most communities hear that, because frankly, people are busy, right? Like we all are binging like crazy TV right now. So we probably don't even recognize half the emails that are inviting us to meetings. But beyond that, we're just busy. And so it's difficult for people to prioritize getting involved and coming to your thing, right? And so the more you can do to make it very easy, those one question surveys, things like that, the more at least you'll get some feedback from the community. And then the other side of it, I think, is communications. What I've seen communities do who really do a lot to get community input over many, many months, sometimes years, is they take the time to count as they go. How many people responded to how many different questions in those emails? How many people showed up at the meetings? How many organizations did we visit or talk to? How many one-on-one phone calls? It's really good to present those metrics, as stale as that sounds. It's good to promote those metrics and communicate that to the community so they say, oh, wow, okay, I guess they did reach out. Well, gosh, I don't know. I didn't see anything about it until tonight, but I guess other people did. So at the very least, doing that helps.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I wouldn't add anything to that. I mean, I think there is a certain level of, you're going to do everything you can to reach out. And there's always going to be that segment of the population that said, you didn't do enough. And that's the reality of it. But the suggestions, the examples that Andy provided tonight are really good pieces that you can do to say, no, this is what we did. This is how we tried. This, to me, the most important piece is identifying all those segments that are out there and how you can reach out to them. And you offer out that opportunity. And then if they take advantage of it, they don't, you made that effort. But there isn't really a way to measure and say, okay, we've hit our mark. It really depends on your community, what you guys know is best, who are those important stakeholders, who are those voices that are going to be there, and knowing, there's certain people that are resistant to participate. I think back once again to the Kendall Mountain project and all this work you guys did, and then you still had the segment come out that said, you didn't listen to us, or you didn't reach out to us. Still trying to figure out what are those ways, give those opportunities, and then at some point they have a response.
Right. That's a good point, Patrick. Some people already know how they feel. They don't need to listen to you and then give you their feedback. They already know they hate it, or, whatever. So you won't be able to reach them anyway if they're not open. Other questions or comments, even for each other, about next steps or anything else? Okay.
Andy, thank you. I think you laid it all out so succinctly. Really appreciate it. And would it be possible to get a copy of your slides?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh.
I feel bad.
Mhm.
Normally we would do this in 2 to 2.5 hours, but on a Zoom call, that's kind of brutal. So I still threw all the same information at you. So thanks for bearing with me. I will send that to you, and you can email Casey or I, and I'm happy to share more examples and more thoughts.
It was an
Yeah, I'll send
immense
that to
amount of
Lisa.
information.
Well, thanks for hanging in there. All
Well,
right.
I just want to add, like I've told you guys before when we previously met, that, DOLA has a lot of these resources that are there for you. So whether it's tonight or, 2 months down the road, you guys have questions or whatever, that's what we're here to do. We're here to support you and help you be successful in doing what's right for your community. So, do not hesitate to reach out, to me, to Andy, to Casey, the people at DOLA. That's what we love and why we're dedicated to what we do, is helping local communities like all of you, whether it's the government or just stakeholders in the communities, do what's best for your community. So do.
Thank you. Well, the first step in the process slides was to research and discuss goals and desired outcomes. Is that what this committee feels pretty good about targeting over the next month before our next meeting? Looking at some of the examples that Andy suggested, and doing research to come back and discuss for the next meeting, as well as starting to flesh out a plan for the plan, and decide what this committee's scope will be in terms of how much we want to take on, and having heard the different ways to approach the process and scopes, what is appropriate for Silverton at this time. I think everybody gets quiet after 7:30.
While you guys
I
are
think it's
thinking,
reasonable.
another, okay.
Okay.
It's a reasonable start. Yes.
Great. So keeping with our schedule so far, our next meeting would be the 4th Tuesday of October, which would be October 27th at 6 o'clock. Can we tentatively schedule our next meeting for that date and time? Cool. Yeah, I guess. Thank you very much, Andy and Patrick, for joining us. Andy, thanks so much for putting together that presentation. I think we'll definitely be in close contact with you as we figure out what our trajectory is, and we'll have tons of questions, I'm sure. So thank you very, very much for taking time in your evening to hang out with us. And thank you to DOLA generally for being such an awesome resource to this community.
Yeah, thank you all for spending an evening on this.
All right. Well, thank you all. Have a wonderful night. I think, oh, we don't have any public on the meeting, but we would normally have public comments. So I just want to reference that for the video, that there is no public here. So there's no need for opening this up for public comment. And unless anyone has anything else, we can go ahead and adjourn the meeting. So
Thank you.
Thanks,
thank you
everyone.
all. Have a wonderful night.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you, Andy. Thank you, Patrick. Much appreciated.
I would second that. Thank you to DOLA, and thank you to Patrick for arranging this for us.
Thank you, Lisa.